Well, the new Congress is setting their priorities for 2019, and freshman farm state lawmakers are working to bring their regional issues into focus. In an exclusive interview with RFD-TV's Sarah Mock, she sits down with Iowa Representative Cindy Axne, who breaks down her rural priorities for the year ahead.
You are a Democrat who won a district in a state that is often kind of pretty conservative. Could you talk about the message that you offered to rural Americans or rural folks in your district specifically, and why you think that resonated with them in 2018?
Sure. Well, you know, I'm a Democrat. My mom grew up on a farm in Warren County. My dad, he's the first off the farm in his family. His parents grew up on a farm in Marion County. And so I'm not, and like a lot of Iowans, we're not very far removed from growing up on a farm. And so I think that was part of the connection. I understand our rural communities. I've been there. I spent summers on my grandparents' farms. They grew soybeans, corn, and pork. So I really talked about the issues that I know our families in our area, quite honestly, all across our district. We have a lot of similarities in some of our urban areas that we have in our rural areas, as far as not having access to good quality health care, making sure that we protect our public schools and ensure that every kid has an opportunity for a good education and some type of post-secondary education.
So you just did a rural hospital tour in your district. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what you saw and heard on that tour?
Yes, well, first and foremost, healthcare is very important for our district and quite honestly for people across the country, but in particular in our rural areas, we are lacking a lot of adequate opportunity to provide people what they need to live healthy lives. And so we decided it was important to go out and find out what was happening in our district, and we took an 8-county tour. What we saw in Redfield in particular was a lack of funding because of the type of facility it is, a rural health care clinic, and that lack of funding unfortunately means they're not able to provide some of the services that are necessary, and certainly not keep some of the prescriptions available that people need.
So talk about how you're bringing that back to Washington, and what does that mean in terms of legislation you're prioritizing this year, or activities you're planning to do here in the nation's capital? I
want people to understand here in the House who might come from much larger area, more populated areas, that there's in many cases a crisis in our rural communities, whether it's healthcare deserts, whether it's the unaffordability of it all, or whether it's just the fact that we have to drive so far to get to some place that for people who are working a full-time job or 2 jobs to make ends meet, that's something that they just can't do.
We heard from both sides earlier this week about infrastructure. We didn't hear a lot of details on either side, but of course Iowa, I'm sure, has many infrastructure priorities, especially in terms of rural and ag. Could you talk a little bit about what you'd like to see in terms of infrastructure in 2019 or beyond?
Absolutely. It's part, I've traveled the district quite a bit when I was running for this race, and I basically focused on a plan for our rural communities, and that did include infrastructure. So that's not just our roads and bridges, which we've got 5,000 bridges in need of repair. It's our water and sewer systems. We have pipes that are almost 100 years old. They're ripe for failure. It's housing in our rural communities. It's not the fact that it's even affordable housing. It's housing. We don't have that. And certainly it's cellular and broadband. And so I want to see an infrastructure bill that's very broad and that encompasses those things, addresses our schools as well, makes sure that we can continue to have good public education in our school systems, and in particular in our rural communities. And so we've got a lot that we need to address to make sure that infrastructure bill works for us.
Trade is such a big issue for folks across the Midwest right now, and there's a little bit of conversation, it seems, on Capitol Hill about some legislation that might bring back some of the power to Congress in putting on tariffs and doing some of these other trade actions that have so negatively affected agriculture. Would you be in support of kind of some of this conversation that's going on around adding some additional limitations to the president's tariff powers?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm in favor of anything that's going to protect our farmers and our agriculture community. As you well know, the dollars that we generate out of agriculture agriculture impact everybody's lives in Iowa. It's a huge part of our economy. And so when we're talking about supporting our agriculture, it's not just our farmers, it's our implement dealers, it's our car dealers, it's our small banks. We're very interconnected, and so I'll look at anything that can help us help our agriculture community.
Well, Axne will serve on the House Agriculture Committee. She says opening new markets, raising farmland values, and also expanding rural broadband are key priorities for the year ahead. Well, a recruiting challenge offers balanced bipartisan representation on a major ag subcommittee.